Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming out this evening. Appreciate you spending your Saturday night with us. My name is Benjamin Neely. I'm the Executive Director of the Berks History Center. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone here for this evening's program. Before we get started, I just wanted to have a few words with you here. Thank you. That's what this whole night's about. We really appreciate our members. You know, the last couple of years with the pandemic, you know, it definitely hit us hard, but we were able to take the punch. And a large part of the reason why we were able to do that is because of the support of our members. We started off sitting at home doing conference calls and looking at each other on the cameras on our computers, trying to figure out what we were going to do to continue to have any kind of programming whatsoever for you, because we were programmed to get you all here into our library doing research, walking through a museum, coming in here where we've met for nearly 100 years to do programs like this. And it all got turned on its head. So we really appreciated having you with us through our journey as we learned how to negotiate this. The next pandemic, we're going to have it down pat, no problem. No problem. We figured it all out now. But so tonight, it means a lot to us to be able to do this. This is the first time we've been able to have a new exhibit in the Palmer gallery here in over 2 years. We loved our past exhibit that celebrated our 150 years as an organization, but it's wonderful to have something new here. So thank you all for joining us tonight. It's having you here, it's like medicine for us, so thank you. Amber Froman is our curator here. She's going to be running the projector for us tonight, and she is also the brains behind the exhibit here. So how she spent her time during the pandemic was taking all these glass slides and shuffling them back and forth to scan them all and sort through them. And Amber actually has an art background and has a real eye for art, and sorting through these photos that she put together a wonderful array of different kinds of images that Dr. Haman was fond of taking and showing sort of the vast, still lifes and everyday life that the man captured through his photography. So it's a very nice program. And we have, if you want to learn more about what we have going on, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We put a lot of information up there. Our website, berkshistory.org. We finally have a calendar thick enough to start sending out our postcards again, so look in your mail. We'll try to get a few of those out each year to try and keep everything as current as possible so you know what's happening here. One of our great programs with Amber is our Brunch and Brushes program. So she guides you through doing some painting. It's Pennsylvania German art, historic art, sort of recreating that. And even if you've never painted before and you think, I can't paint, she can help you do that. You think, this is going to stress me out. It won't. You're going to feel so mellow this time. And even if it doesn't come out the best, it's okay. You call it abstract and you just enjoy the snacks anyway. Don't worry about it. It's a great program, so I hope maybe you'll join us for one of those coming up here. But tonight we have a relatively newcomer, up-and-coming historian that wanted to talk to you all. Maybe you've heard of him. His name is George Meiser. And if you permit me just to read a little bit about Mr. Meiser here, give him a proper introduction. He was born, reared, and educated here in Reading, Pennsylvania. And soon after graduating from Kutztown University, he was appointed the principal of Alsace Consolidated School in Ole Valley in Berks County, PA. And from 1966 to 1996, he was on the faculty of the Wyomissing Area School District. Mr. Meiser is well known for his long-running newspaper series and his books, The Passing Scene. I'm sure it's on many of your bookshelves at home. Mr. Meiser has joined the Historical Society of Berks County in August of 1959 and has been a member for 67 years now. And there you go. And his wife Gloria has been a member for 54 years after receiving a membership along with an engagement ring. That is a good move. He served as an associate editor for the Historical Review of Berks County from 1966 to 1999. He was followed by 5 years as a publisher. And Mr. Meiser was the vice president of the Historical Society of Berks County from 1996 to 1998, and its president from 1998 to 2011. And thereafter, Now he's our president emeritus. And today he's on our museum and library committee. We get the benefit from George here as we meet to decide what comes into the collection, and it's wonderful to benefit from all of his knowledge. And he's also been leading our history team as we develop our next road ramble, which is coming up October 22nd. It's going to be outstanding, and George Meiser's leading the way, and we'll take you for another ride throughout the county. We're going to take you some beautiful places with a lot of great stories. So we hope to keep an eye out for information as we start to put that out there, and will join us in October. And we'll just cross our fingers for some nice weather. But if you'll help me welcome to the podium tonight, our speaker, Mr. George Meiser, the ninth.
Thank you, Ben. Well, this concludes our program. Dr. Haman. Dr. Haman was head of the Department of X-ray for a long time at the Homeopathic Hospital, later Community General Hospital. He was a surgeon and a regular physician. There wasn't anything that he couldn't do. He graduated from Haman Hospital with very, very high honors. Someone told me one time that he graduated with an average of 100. Boy, it's tough to make any mistakes and still come out with 100. But anyhow, and he graduated from Reading High also at the top of his class. You'll see in these pictures two of his sons, Miles and Guy. Guy was born in 1890, and he was the older of the two, and Miles came along in 1893. Kitty, who supplied a lot of information that I had and that I acquired about Dr. Haman, came along in 1902, and she lived until 1990. I used to call her from time to time. After she got married, she moved from the Reading area, went to Boston, the wife of a physician. I'm going to tell you a funny little story. First of all, his photography is phenomenal. There was no one who lived in Reading and Berks County in that time period who could come anywhere near the achievements that Dr. Haman enjoyed. First of all, he had the best camera in the world for stereography. He had a 5x7 Graflex view camera. Now, those things ran around $200 at a time in the late 90s, when you could buy a 3-story house in the 800 block of Gordon Street for $900. He paid $200 for that camera, which came with Gortz lenses. He was brilliant in chemistry. I have a lot of his 5x7 stereopticon glass plates, and each one is in a separate little envelope, and on there it tells exactly what day it was taken, what were the weather conditions like, what time did he take it, not 4:30, 4:27. What his aperture was, what the camera speed was, what developer he used. Sometimes, I remember one day I was looking at these, I had 4 negatives taken the same day, and they were all developed slightly differently based on the time of the day and the general lighting conditions. Who else does that? I mean, who else ever did that? He was brilliant, there's no doubt about that. Anyhow, let's see some of these pictures. Now, this is funny. When I first got together with Amber about doing something along these lines, I showed her some of these pictures and I gave her the titles. And I said to her, with the one picture, Stolen Pleasures. And she looked at me and what did you say, Amber?
Behind Mama's back.
Behind Mama's back. So apparently he labeled, when he first took them, he labeled his negative one thing, but when he converted them, for whatever reason, generally for contests reasons, he gave them a different name. Anyhow, according to what I have on my envelope, what do you suppose he called this? Going fishing. Going fishing. That should be rather evident, actually. Anyhow, you notice there he has a beard. Now, when I spoke to both Kitty and one of his nurses that helped him in the emergency department of the Community General Hospital, one morning he got up to go to the hospital. He lathered his face, picked up the razor, and the phone rang. And here was someone calling that there was an emergency. He had to go to the hospital immediately. Okay, he wiped over his face and went to the hospital. Next morning, he got up, went to the bathroom, lathered his face, picked up the razor, and the phone rang again. He was so pleased with the time that he saved, he never shaved again. So any picture that you see with a beard after 1900, any picture you see without the beard prior to 1900. Okay, going fishing. By the way, you have to be impressed with the sharpness both of the pictures that Amber has in the exhibit and the things that you're going to be seeing here. Look at the design in the basket, the fish basket, the bait basket, how clear that is. There's a picture back there of the men in the Reading Lantern Slide Club, and the fellow has a very small design in his pants. Look at that picture, how clear that is. The photography is amazing. And any picture that was taken indoors years ago, you're seeing pictures that very few people could achieve in 1900. First of all, you know that if you're at home and you want to take a picture inside and you have a regular old camera, you don't get very much, it gets very dark. So in order to get pictures years ago, when film was very slow, how many remember buying film with an ASA of 100? 200. Tri-X, 400. He was taking glass plates at ASA 5. That's really slow. What does that mean? That means that you use a tripod for everything, no hand holding ever. So whenever you see these pictures, know that he was carrying a big, heavy camera. Those Graflex stereo cameras are big and they're heavy. You had to carry the tripod. You had to carry a focusing cloth. You had no light meter. That's where your intelligence came in. All pictures were taken by estimation or guesstimation. That's how it was done. I'm going to tell you a quick funny story I didn't say last night. 1976, they were going to tear down the old Borough Hall, beautiful Richardsonian building on the main square of Wummelsdorf. And I was there at the corner across from the building. I had this big, heavy tripod. I had my 8x10 camera, which is a monster. I had a focusing cloth around my shoulders. I had a Luna Pro light meter dangling down from my neck. I had a a film plate holder propped by the side of the tripod, and I heard a noise, and I turned around, and there was a woman standing there staring. And I said, you want to know something, or is there a question? She said, are you going to take a picture? To which I replied in the affirmative. This is a remarkable picture. Now, remember, every picture was taken with a tripod. Christmas Eve, 1898, he went to City Park with a tripod, this heavy camera, and a box with plates in the snow, all by himself. Isn't that a remarkable picture? Now, that's the kind of a thing you would probably get with your new iPhone 13 Pro, which gives an amazingly sharp picture in very poor light. In that day, he was shooting plates at ASA 5. That he got a picture of that quality in 1898 is nothing short of remarkable. Up in City Park, along Constitution Boulevard, very close to the greenhouse that you see up in the City Park, was the old rustic spring. That appears on one or two old postcards for the folks who collect old-time postcards, the rustic spring. By around the end of World War I, that was gone. It apparently fell apart. It was entirely too rustic. The bandstand in City Park. Now today, if you go to City Park to watch a concert, you sit where that bandstand is. You put your folding chairs there. You look across the pond to the band shell. Well, in those days, they put it right there. I showed this to a senior citizens group one time and said, Mr. Meiser. I said, what? He said, my daddy played the cornet solo the day that was dedicated in 1897. Yeah. Well, that's Constitution Boulevard, and the greenhouse. Now, it doesn't look quite the same today because they had to restructure it due to deterioration of the ironwork, due to the moisture that builds up inside of a greenhouse. It deteriorated the old ironwork. And, of course, we have old St. Joe's in the background. What you're seeing there, that curvature, is Constitution Boulevard. Now, when you drive through City Park, you know that you go in sort of an oval if you drive around and follow the road. And the reason for that was during the days when the Reading Fair was in City Park, that was a racetrack. Where the band shell stands today, there was seating for spectators to watch the races. What kind of races? Horse races. Bicycle racing was very big up in City Park years ago. How many remember Nubling store? The sporting goods store at Penn Street up around 9th? Well, Emil Nubling was a champion bicycle racer, as was Judge Stallone's grandfather, very good at bicycle racing. So they had bicycle races there, they had horse races there, and if you go at 11 o'clock at night, they're still racing. Well, we're up in City Park again, and we have the Elk Fountain. That Elk Fountain was iron, and the unusual feature of that was, now you can't see it here, the base at one side opened up, and they used to pack that with ice. So that in the summertime, you could go to City Park and get iced water, which was a big deal. About 1897 or 98, there was an article in the Reading Eagle saying about a reporter who was sent there to sit on a bench to count the number of people who came for iced water, and the number was phenomenal. That was a big deal. Where else would you go in that time period to get iced water at a public facility? Where was the other one? The WCTU fountain at 5th and Penn. It's still there. They sort of moved it. Remember when it was right against the sidewalk? It had 3 places that dispensed water. From the sidewalk level, you'd walk up and you'd get your drink. And what you didn't drink ran down a chute, and it went down to a space below on the other side for horses to drink. And then it drained from that side again back to the front for cats and dogs. Those things are still there, but of course, I don't think the fountain is working. I'm not sure. Is it working? Yeah. It's not working. Well, the WCTU fountain gave you iced water. So there were 2 places in Reading. Now notice that they're all enjoying a drink using the same tin cups. Those were the days before trench mouth. I had an email 2 days ago from someone who said, what happened to the elk in City Park? And the answer is, it probably is in Belgium or Berlin or wherever. In the late 1930s, it had been taken, the fountain itself rusted away or was in very bad condition. They took it away and they put the elk, and there's a picture of one of the passing scene books of the elk just sitting on the lawn nearby. Those of you who remember the scrap drives of World War II, they were fierce. There are photographs of Penn Street with piles and piles of everything that you can possibly imagine made out of metal. It was your patriotic duty to surrender as much metal as you possibly could to the war effort. People gave their front gates. And those who didn't give, sometimes they were swiped and put on the scrap pile. That's what happened to the elk. He disappeared during World War II. This one has always amazed me. Now, look at the condition of that lawn. Those are the days before the rotary mowers. That was hand-pushed mowed. Can you imagine that? Hand-pushed mowed. Now, they had some motorized ones that came along later in the 1920s. It was like a reel mower, but it had a motor to it and operated the reel. That was all hand-mowed and hand-trimmed. When was the last time you saw City Park looking like that? It's been a while. Now, what's behind that embankment that you see where the flag is? Reservoir. That's where Reading gets its water. For years and years, the primary source of water for the city of Reading was there's a double reservoir up there. Someone asked me, is the water still up there? And I said, I don't know. But about 25, 30 years ago, I did a story for the Reading Eagle on City Park. And the water commissioner at that time invited me up to City Park. We opened a manhole, which was sort of hidden in a clump of bushes, and there's a ladder in there. And you could actually climb down that ladder into the reservoir. I had a good camera with me with a good flash, It was so vast and so dark that a picture turned out. That's how big it is down there. Was there water there at the time? Yes. How far did I go down? Not very far. I held onto that ladder like you wouldn't believe. The old Reading Fair, 1898. Now you can tell it's August by the way they're dressed. Now the building that you see on the right-hand side was the old Fairgrounds Hotel. Every fairground, Allentown, others, always had a hotel. Why? Because some of the exhibitors and the vendors and all that sort of thing would stay for the week. So they'd go to the hotel, rent a room, and they would be right there on the grounds for whatever reason necessary. That building stood until, it's been a while now that I look back, until fairly recent years. Those of you who remember Northeastern Lumber Company, Nelco, that was their office up on 11th Street. Nelco Lumber occupied what had been the old fairgrounds on 11th Street. And there you see people waiting to go in August. That's why they're all wearing black. There we're inside, and we see something that amazed me the first time I saw it. Notice how much litter there is. I thought littering was a recent thing. Apparently they were still littering. I mean, they were littering already in the 1890s. That is a sausage stand that you see at the bottom, and above was where you could observe the racetrack. Sausage sandwiches, 5 cents a piece. Sulky racing on the racetrack. Now, some of you people have been at exactly the site that you're looking at right now, but you probably didn't realize it. When you're on North 13th Street and you're going out to mail a letter at the post office, North 13th Street, you're going right over that racetrack on 13th Street. 13th Street is over that racetrack. If you go there at midnight, they're still racing. Gloria and I gave this talk to a senior citizens group a number of years ago, and after that we went to the Boscov's North, because remember for a couple of years you had the fairgrounds behind the Boscov's North. They had the Reading Fair there. We went there and they had a week of aerial acts, and we both stood and looked at that and said, my God, that's the same piece of apparatus. And that's no joke. It looked exactly the same. Now notice how many people are wearing a hat and what the condition is generally today. And you wonder what happened to the hatting industry of Berks County, which was enormous, and it was Reading's first big industry, the hatting industry. The carousel. I look at this thing and it always amuses me. Those who enjoy a good carousel ride probably wouldn't appreciate this today. Do you know what motivated that thing? One horse tethered in the inside who walked around. And that gave you the merry-go-round. Now, conversely, C. Howard Heaster, the Canal man, was a friend of ours, and we used to spend a lot of time with him over the weekends. And he told the story at the foot of Jackson's Lock. The foot of 6th Street was Jackson's Lock. And on the little island there, which began at Jackson's Lock and went northward, was what they called the island where they made boats. And on that island, during one summer, a long, long time ago, it was somewhere around 1900, they got a carousel, the use of a carousel for one summer. And it played one song. Mrs. Heaster said she was so tired of it in the good old summertime. It played incessantly all day long for as long as that thing ran. But it operated on a gasoline engine. And if you sat on the outside horse, they could make it go 60 miles an hour. That's a major departure from the last picture that you saw. The old Reading Fair, North 11th Street. Again, the basic property of the Reading Postal Facility up on 11th Street. You see the lady here on the forest and the near side in her August attire. And the little boy standing with rapt attention in the lower right-hand corner, curious about what is so fascinating about Madame Zita's dancing girls from Natchez. This is one of the great pictures. Now, this was not a stereo view. This was taken with a 4x5 camera. Dr. Haman had a 4x5 camera that he had prior to buying his stereo Graflex camera. And this was a picture that he took. You're looking at the Schuylkill Canal. Rack would be here off to your right. And the old Penn Street Bridge, well, the second oldest Penn Street Bridge, the original one was a wooden bridge, which was replaced in 1884 by an iron bridge. And what you're seeing there is the 1884 iron bridge. And they said when they put it up, it was the marvel of the modern age, impervious to wear or weather conditions. What they didn't count on was the trains running beneath it endlessly, spewing all sorts of things out of the smokestack that deteriorated the bridge. The bridge became so compromised that people had to get off at Penn Street, walk across the bridge, and then the trolley followed them over to West Reading. Then they got back on the trolley again, heading for Wyomissing and points beyond. Well, many of you sitting here, I'm sure, will remember the old Pennsy Depot at the foot of Penn Street, at the present Penn Street Viaduct. When they look at that picture, they say, well, I don't remember it looking like that. And the answer is, no, you don't remember it looking like that because it didn't look like that in your time. When they built the Penn Street Viaduct, the viaduct was much wider than the Iron Truss Bridge. So what did they do? They lopped off the top of the Pennsy station as you see it there. That wasn't there. If you remember driving over or walking over the sidewalk, looking down, it sat quite a bit below the Penn Street Viaduct in your time. These canal boats were at the Franklin Street Guard Lock. At the foot of Franklin Street, there was a guard lock. What's a guard lock? Well, they had two kinds of locks in the old days: lift locks and guard locks. All along Reading's waterfront, beginning here at the foot of Franklin, going all the way over to the foot of South 6th, the canal ran inland because all along there were factories years ago, there were warehouses and whatever. And whenever things got bad and the Schuylkill began to flood and things began getting nasty, they would close the gates. Otherwise, they were open all the time. They'd close the gates to keep the water out of the canal, to keep the lower Reading from flooding. That's what a guard lock was. Someone told me that part of that lock is still buried at that site today. We went looking for it a number of years ago. I couldn't tell whether that was true or not, but someone who was around at the time said he remembers when that was sort of closed in. When they, good enough. Next one. The year was 1898, Reading's sesquicentennial year. And during that year, Reading really went out in a big way to celebrate the celebration. And here we have the Mansion House Hotel, the finest hotel in Berks County during its time. This was one of the first buildings, first brownstone buildings put up in the city of Reading. And this was a 4-story brownstone building. It was the pride of the city of Reading. Mr. Umbel became proprietor of that, and the hotel had such success that they decided they needed more room, so they added 2 more stories. You can see the delineation here. Top 2 stories. Well, the bottom was brownstone, and the 2 additional stories above were brick. And the Reading Herald came out and said this was an atrocity. Why would you, said this was an assault on the sensibilities of the good folk of Reading. So Mr. Umbel decided to atone for his shortcomings, and he painted the building one color, canary yellow, which it remained until it was torn down in 1937. Finest hotel in the city of Reading. But look to what extent they went to decorate in those days. Now, this was taken from what would be the window of Pomeroy's in the corner, but of course there's no Pomeroy's. And when this picture was taken, there was no Pomeroy's either. There was a stone store building with a photography studio on the top floor that stood at the corner of 6th and Penn. It was the Heisman Building. Mr. Heisman was president of this society many years ago. The Heisman Building. They tore it down in the year 1900. They tore it down 2 years after this picture was taken to put up the Pomeroys that some of us remember. And that was taken, here we have the Farmers National Bank, which was a bank from 1814 until they closed it. Here we have the Marble Ranch building at the corner of 4th and Penn. And the second floor of that, the Reading Times was printed for about 2 years. And we have the Grand Central Hotel, which was a marvel in its time. The Reading Eagle reported that this was such an outstanding structure, so big that it verily pierced the heavens. Of course, there was no elevator. Okay, and over here would have been the Crystal Restaurant area. Again, the Crystal Restaurant area would be in here. And the Keystone Hotel or the Pennsylvania House Hotel stands on the corner. That's a very old property. That goes back to the 1700s. Some of you might remember in the 1950s, they took off the top stories because it was a fire hazard and it would cost too much to bring it up to code. So they took off all the top stories with the exception of the first story, which still stands on the corner of 6th and Penn today. And down here we have Stichter's Hardware. If Stichter's didn't have it, you couldn't get it. Some of you remember that. We're looking out the front door of Pomeroy's, as some of us remember the front door of Pomeroy's. And up here we have Yoder's Spirits. That was not a church. And we have an old bank building here at this site. That was a very fine building. That was a shame when that was torn down. I regretted seeing that go during Reading's reclamation. Cough, cough. Oops. We had a little problem with one slide. That's the one slide. We're looking at North 8th Street, looking north from Washington Street, and this would have been the area where Dr. Haman had lived. And look at that old-fashioned snow. This is a very rare picture and one of the earliest ones that I have that Dr. Haman had taken. This was the Reading Academy at 4th and Court, which eventually became Girls High School for a short time. They tore that down in 1893 to put up Girls High School that some of us remember at 4th and Court. And of course, that was taken down, and now I guess it's a parking area in that general area today. But that was the Reading Academy, the forerunner of Reading High School. Now, there was something very interesting about that photograph. By the way, look at that over here. So you have an idea of what was going on inside there. This was a rare photograph. I told you about the reservoir up in City Park. When I was about in 8th grade, I was on the trolley, and we were at 6th and Penn, and the trolley was stopped while they were doing some excavation work. They looked out the window, and here they found Reading used to have water pipes coming down from Penn's Common that were wooden water pipes. They looked like a tree hollowed out. They had a diameter of maybe 20 inches. They were hollowed out in the center, and they carried the water down to the city of Reading to select sites. And one of those select sites was the structure in Reading that was considered one of the most valuable entities within the city. That building. Now, you see what's there? Reading's first fire hydrant. And that was one of the reasons they ran that pipe down to supply. They didn't want to lose their Reading Academy. That was a very busy building. They had classes for the people who were of educatable age, but they also had a lot of lectures there in the evening, scientific lectures, all sorts of things. Reading Academy, a very rare picture. That's the only picture that I know of any quality that exists of that building. Reading Iron Company. Over here is the Schuylkill River. This would have been right near at the base of Neversink Mountain. Neversink Mountain would be up here. You're looking down. That was one of the major entities industrially of Berks County and Pennsylvania. Reading Iron was big, very, very big. Unfortunately, it came to an end in the 1930s when they had a major contract to supply pipes for some municipality out in Midwest. The metallurgist who was in charge of getting the ironwork with specifications ready cheated a little bit to save money for the company because things were tough. He cut back on the formula. They sent these pipes out. The fellow that I talked to, who actually was there at the time, they sent train after train after train loaded with these pipes. They were rejected because of poor quality and all sent back. The guy said, you wouldn't believe it. It was so sickening. All these trains were coming back loaded with pipes that were rejected. It destroyed the company. When I was a kid, I used to walk down the foot of West Douglas Street where they had some buildings from the Reading Iron, and there were still old structures left there from the time that it closed down, all because one person decided he was going to save money. Bad move. People last night got this one right. I said, I showed this picture many times, and I'm wondering, is he making soap or apple butter? Which is it? The consensus is apple butter. This wasn't identified, but I'm presuming it's apple butter. Now, the interesting aspect of this is Northeast Reading. Northeast Reading. And there we have Mount Penn in the background, so you get a general idea of its location, sloping down towards McKnight's Gap. Now, years ago, when someone came with a great big view camera with all the paraphernalia, and you set it up, little kids rarely walked in the opposite direction holding their hind end. So you might assume that he made some strategic error along the way. The entrance to Charles Evans Cemetery, at a time when that beautiful ornate woodwork was still in place, that burned away. That's why when you go there today, there's simply empty openings, no fancy woodwork anymore. Now, when you go in there the next time, hopefully on foot, look down and you will see there are no bricks or cobblestones as you go in. What do you see? Wooden blocks. Wooden blocks. Reading had a number of wooden streets. Now, when I say wood, I don't mean planks. I mean square pieces like so, elongated, and they were driven down vertically all together to form what looks like brick. But it's not brick, it's wood. North 8th Street, North 4th, I know for a fact were wooden. 8th, 4th, there was one more. I remember years ago I went to an antique shop on North 8th Street, not too far from City Hall, and they were cleaning the snow away, and they tore up a bit too low, and one of the blocks chipped off, and you could see it was wooden underneath. So those wooden blocks are still there, I know for sure. And 6th. And 6th. I stood at the corner of the Raja Theater one time, and they were doing something, and several of those, macadam had broken away, and you could see the wooden blocks underneath. So I know 4th, 6th, and 8th for sure still have the wooden blocks. Anyhow, why would they use the wooden blocks? To keep things quiet. Who wants to wake the dead? Gertrude Sternberg's home, built in the 1890s, 93, 94. Gertrude was a good friend of ours, and she loved these photographs. She loved anything dealing with that general area around her home on Center Avenue, across from the entrance to Charles Evans Cemetery. That's really quite a home. It's beautiful. After her passing, and even after it was sold, Tad Kastner, who belongs to the society and who was here last night, we went up to the attic, and the attic was still full of trunks with things that went back to the 1890s with H. Hervey Sternberg and Gertrude's family. They might still be up there, I don't know. Now, you know what was there before that? A big old hotel. They tore the hotel down to put up that place. Now, we've gotten away from the city of Reading. We've gone out Lancaster Avenue to Shillington, and at Shillington on the corner where there's a gas station, you turn left and you head into Moulton. You go through Moulton, down to the south end, you keep on going straight, and it takes this road here, takes you down to Canals, or the area of Alleghenyville. Anyhow, on the way down was this, a gun barrel factory. You people who know something about local history know that along the Wyomissing there was a great deal of gun making years back, barrel makers. And This was a gun barrel factory. That's a very rare picture, by the way. That's a real dandy. What happened along the way, they decided they were going to harness the power, and they put up an apple press to make cider. That's why that's built right against there. And the story is told that at some point, I spoke with a gentleman from Moulton years ago who told me that when he was a boy, they'd have these wagons loaded with apples, all in a line waiting for their turn at the apple press, at the cider press. And they would wait all during the night to make sure that they didn't lose their turn to have the apples pressed. Anyhow, at some point they decided that it might be a better idea to move it to a more convenient location. So they got an army of men and put it on logs and rolled it about 2 blocks and set it up again. And then 2 weeks later, it burned to the ground. Alvernia, I guess, controls to some degree what was Angelica Park. What you're looking at is what would be part of Angelica Park today. But many of us remember the lake at Angelica, Lake Angelica, but you're looking at Lake Angelica when it served a more useful purpose, I guess, and that was for harvesting ice. There used to be signs years ago and advertisements in various venues about the pure water, pure ice from this locality. Now that's the ice house, and you're seeing that. That's long gone, by the way. And well, so is the lake as far as that goes. Years ago, if you wanted to maintain ice, and kids found this very difficult to believe, to tell you that you could harvest ice from a lake, put it in a building, pack it by whatever means, and that it would still be there until late August, and sometimes even into September. Because in the days before refrigeration, most people had ice boxes at home. As a matter of fact, when I was a little kid, a lot of people that I knew still had ice boxes. You'd walk down the street and you'd see the signs hanging in the front window, 25, 50, 75, 100, how much ice they needed that day or that delivery. Well, in order to keep ice years ago, you would put it in a building with immediate drainage. That was very important. You wouldn't want any puddles building up anywhere. And you'd put sawdust between all the layers so they wouldn't fuse together. And if the walls were thick enough, and by the way, they lined those walls with cork 3 to 4 inches thick as insulation. If the bigger the ice house, the bigger the body of ice, the longer the ice lasted until the next harvesting season. Angelica Pure Ice Company. Route 724, going into Shillington, from heading into Shillington, and we're at Grill. Many of you people, I'm sure, have passed through Grill on the way to Shillington. Is that Philadelphia Avenue leading in there? Anyhow, that is Yoakum's Lutheran Church. How many are familiar with that? Ooh. Okay. That looks very much the same today. Now, in more recent years, they put up something out in the back there for Christian education. They put up a special building. Now, if you look very closely, you see a small building behind the church now in that picture, but that was not for Christian education. Some of you, I'm sure, I hope, will remember Bully Lion's Restaurant down at Neversink. Bully Lions burned quite a number of years ago. It was put up in 1912 as a 2-room schoolhouse. Neversink Schoolhouse was what it was. Anyhow, right near where Bully Lions was one of the signal towers on the P&R Railroad. They had those periodically for signaling purposes. In the foundation in here, they had Edison cobalt batteries, which according to a Mr. Wenzel, which we interviewed about 1965-66, said that his dad worked at Neversink in that signal tower, and that Edison cobalt battery was never failing. Where is it now when we need it for the cars? Never failing, and that his dad worked at Neversink in that signaling station. His dad had been injured in a railroad accident in the switching yard, And being the benevolent organization it was, the P&R company, they gave him a job that was much easier for him to handle. They put him in charge of that signal tower, and he said it took his dad 20 minutes to climb that ladder to get up to the job every time he had to go to work. Now, a number of you people, I'm sure, will surely be familiar with this. How many have been there? Crystal Cave. Okay. Now, they've painted it up a little bit. It's a bit more. Anyhow, that's Crystal Cave. It's about 1871. Mr. Merkel was quarrying for limestone, and he broke through, and he found this marvel of nature with the stalagmites and stalactites. I'm sure many of you people have been to Crystal Cave. Anyhow, the story is told, and when that was in the Reading papers and the Allentown papers, the people came in hordes on the railroad to Virginville, got on a wagon at Virginville, and came over here to see this marvel of wonder, the Crystal Cave. Anyhow, the story is told that Mr. Merkel was sitting on this rock one day in August. It was very, very hot. He had taken his hat off and had it on his lap, and somebody came out from behind, from the inside the cave, and looked over and dropped some coins in his hat. The people who were coming behind that person saw what they did, and they dropped some coins in the hat. And Mr. Merkel came to realize he had a good thing going here, and they've been charging ever since. That is the Tulpehocken Creek. That is Dr. Haman in the wagon, and he took that picture. I talked to Kitty, and she said she remembers as a girl that he said he was very clever. He was really very, very bright in all regards. And he devised a mechanical contrivance that he could get a number of minutes. I don't know how many it was anymore. I've forgotten. But anyhow, he had a shutter release that worked on a mechanical basis like a clock. And he would have so many minutes that he could set up a scene, get in the picture, have his picture taken. And that's how this was taken, with a mechanical shutter release that he invented. This is a great picture. That's one of these early pictures that he had taken about 1893-94 with a 4x5 camera. That's along the Tulpehocken Creek, and that was a mule shed. Every so often along the Union Canal, they had mule sheds for exchanging mules for a fresh mule. And that was right along the Tulpehocken. Look what a great picture that was for 1894. We were in the camera business when Instamatic cameras came out, which were trash. And it amazed us to no end about the people who bought the Instamatic cameras, took pictures, and marveled at how wonderful they were. Gloria and I would look at them and say, oh my God, really see this? And they'd look at it and they'd smile. And they were so pleased with what the Instamatic cameras gave them, which was very little. Agnes Small Haman was his wife. She was the one who, according to Kitty, a number of occasions, she would work on pictures for him. You've seen old-time photographs where someone had like little rosy cheeks and perhaps a little bit of lipstick. That she used to do to the photographs that he had taken. Although, two things. I've never seen any of the photographs that were doctored that supposedly she did. And secondly, I just commented to someone coming in, I've never seen a Dr. Haman stereo card. There were none in the collection that you saw, were there, Amber? No. Actual stereo cards. I have the negatives to make them, but I've never seen one. Anyhow, that's Agnes Small on a little footbridge across the Tulpehocken Creek. Another footbridge across the Tulpehocken Creek. Where would you go today to get an outfit like that for your grandson? And the answer was, years ago, Long and Ecker's store for men and boys. Penn Street, 300 blocks, right below Allman's Funeral Home, where Pep Boys, is it still Pep Boys? Oh, whatever it is, where Pep Boys building still stands today. Long and Ecker's store. He labeled this picture Sunbonnet Sue. When I first saw it, I thought to myself, well, if I were in his shoes, I'd have named it Capillary Action, as her hem soaks up all the water. Sunbonnet Sue. This was prior to 1900, right? Clean shaven. And there he is bribing the boy along the Tulpehocken Creek in the area of Grings Mill. That's where that was taken. Notice the hat, no shoes. It was this big. This is an amazing picture. In the days when he was taking these photographs with very slow film, ASA 5, there was a rapid plate film that was ASA 8, but that's still slow as mud. Anyhow, to get any kind of action shown in a picture was difficult. Now, I don't know how he did this, but you notice he got action into this photograph, which really surprised me the first time I saw that, and that's this. Look at the hand motion. Again, one of his fish stories for the kids who were lined up to listen to it. Look at that load of fish. I think you'd sit a long time at the Tully today to pull that many out. I'm not sure. But you see there he's clean shaven and thinner than he was, and then he appeared in later films and pictures. Right on target. What was the other label for that, Amber? Do you remember?
Counting the score or checking the score?
Yeah, something like that, the score. And on mine, it was right on target. Miles and Guy. Now remember that Guy was the taller of the two, the older of the two by 3 years, so it would be Miles and Guy. On the dam at Berkeley, the Reddings filtering plant at Berkeley. I'm sure some of you people have driven by and you've looked over that big stone building. That, of course, today with the new road going through, few people actually go through Berkeley anymore. But anyhow, that was the dam at Berkeley. At one time, a lot of Redding's water came from the water backed up here at Berkeley. That's a really fine picture. One of the real rare pictures in the collection, and this is the Schuylkill Canal going this way. Over here would be the Aqueduct at Gibraltar. You people who drive 724 through Gibraltar, and you look over, you see that stonework along right off the road, the Aqueduct. Well, he's heading towards the Aqueduct, and here, those of you with good vision and an imagination might see the tow rope along the berm here. And up here would be a donkey. Rare photograph. And that is the really rare one. There is no other picture of a canal boat passing over an aqueduct. That's the only one I've ever seen. And I've shown this a number of times that people have never seen. That's the tugboat, the Catfish, crossing the aqueduct at Gibraltar. The Union Canal operated until October of 1884. In the last couple of years that it operated, it was a losing situation. Everyone knew it. It was really going down fast. As a matter of fact, at the last 3 or 4 years, there were no lock tenders anymore. In order to travel on the Union Canal until October of 1884, you had to lock yourself through, which wasn't the easiest process. Now, in the earlier days, they had lock houses at every lock, and they had a lock tender who would help you pass through. Well, this is Blue Marsh, those of you who remember Blue Marsh. That was the lock, the Union Canal lock at Blue Marsh. Now, between 1884, the closing of the canal, and this, about 1898-99, look what the degree of deterioration that took place in that short period of time. Again, Union Canal lock, and here's one of the boys. That was really an advanced state of deterioration. I apologize for this one. What I didn't tell you was that when these pictures came to me, there had been some damage from flood, and some of them were beyond saving. There weren't many, but there were some that were beyond saving. This one had been damaged by water, but it was too good of a picture for me to cast it aside and not use it. That's Stout's Ferry Bridge. The longest single-span bridge, I think it was 243 or 234 feet, abutment to abutment, no support in the middle. When they began dredging the Schuylkill River in the 1940s, and I remember the dredging of the Schuylkill River, When I was in 10th grade, we had our 10th grade hats, class hats. And I had mine. I was so proud of it. I was coming out of Northwest Junior High School. I walked down Spring Street, got over to the Schuylkill Avenue Bridge to look down to see what they were doing. And the wind came along and blew my hat down onto the dredge boat. So I had my hat for 1 hour during the process. Anyhow, that's Stott's Ferry Bridge, the longest single-span covered bridge. You hate to say the world, but it was really a big single-span covered. Covered bridges were enormously heavy. And when you took a heavy wagon over, that's why a lot of them had weight restrictions. Especially as the bridges got older, it became very iffy. The last couple of days before they had a problem there were signs up, travel at your own risk. Think about that. You can cross at your own risk. Anyhow, the dredges came down here, and they got to Stott's Ferry Bridge, and they had to decide, were they going to tear the boat apart, take it underneath, and set it up again on the other side, or were they going to sabotage the bridge, let it collapse into the Schuylkill? Guess what they did? They cut the guy lines. They had metal wires supporting that bridge, cables supporting that bridge. They cut the cables, and the bridge collapsed. That's what happened to Stott's Ferry Bridge. Now, over there is the toll house. Every bridge in Berks County, every covered bridge, was a private enterprise. So people might build a factory, so people might build a forge, they might build a furnace, or they might build a bridge. And you put your bridge at a point where people had to cross to get to a mill or some other place. So every covered bridge out in the country was a private enterprise. The company, it was a bridge company, you owned the bridge. And in order to make it profitable, you hired someone as the toll collector. And you looked for one kind of a person particularly, one who didn't sleep very often and who was implicitly honest. So between honesty and not sleeping, you had a job possibly as a toll collector. That building still stands, but of course the bridge is long gone. 1947. I grew up at 506 West Douglas Street in Reading, across from Bear Park Playground, Bear Park Field House, and 2 blocks down the street from my house. We lived in the very last house in West Douglas. You walk down the extension of West Douglas, it turned gravel at Clinton. You walk down through and you were at Kissinger's Lock. So as a kid, I played at Kissinger's Lock. I remember the lock house. I remember the locks. And that was Kissinger's Lock House that you're seeing there, foot of West Douglas Street. And it was a place where a lot of the kids used to go swimming in the summertime at their own risk. And there was always a risk. There were deaths at every lock site in Berks County. At every lock tender in Berks County, from Port Clinton all the way down through, every lock tender lost 1 or more children. Think about that. Everybody lost a child. Very, very dangerous places. Some of those drops were very considerable, especially on the Schuylkill Canal. Anyhow, that's the foot of West Douglas Street. I interviewed a woman who went there as a very young woman, married a lock tender, and had stories to tell. I interviewed her in the last days of her life. Those locks were deep. Now I must tell you a story. I was involved with the Historical Review. I did pictures for them years and years ago. Dr. Arthur D. Grafe, the famous historian and educator, was publisher, editor of the Historical Review. We were supposed to do a story by Reverend Allwine from Bally on Catholicism in Berks County. And he had a picture lined up, a really nice one, for the cover, so I was told. Dr. Grafe called me in a panic. He said, "George, Reverend Allwine isn't going to get his story in." I said, "Well, what can we do?" He said, I'll have to find something else to put in place of that, but we need something for the cover. I said, "Oh, no problem." I said, "I have a lot of glass plates down in the dark room. I'll go down and I'll make a picture." So I ran down. They wanted to go to press the next day. I went down to the dark room, made a print from the glass plate, swooshed it in the developer, swooshed it in the water. We drove into the Reading Eagle. I was holding it out like this to dry it while I was driving in with one hand. Handed it in, and it was printed cover of the magazine. We have that magazine on file today. Short time later, I get a phone call from Mary Dives Impink, who was first editor of the Historical Review, which came out in October of 1935. She said, Mr. Meiser, did you see the latest issue of the review? I said, yes, I did. She said, did you look at it carefully? I said, yes, I did. She said, did you look at the cover carefully? I said, I think so. He's not wearing trunks. That's our special issue. Those are $20 an issue. That took nerve, you know that. Kissinger's Lock, full of West Douglas Street. By the way, the inner wall of that lock is still there. You should travel along that bicycle path that goes along the Schuylkill River. The wall against the inner wall is still there when you drive by. Now this was taken, over here is Kissinger's Lock House, and over here would be in the Why Missing section. There's Dr. Haman taking his picture, and the kids are frolicking in the Schuylkill River. They could afford a hat, but not shorts. There is Catherine Haman, Kitty Haman, born in 1902, died in 1990. Between Catherine, Kitty Haman, and Dr. Haman's emergency room nurse, with whom I spoke at a lecture that I gave, quite a number of years ago, I gave a lecture at Berks County in what had been the TV building, which was converted to the Berks County Annex. I gave this lecture there. And after it was over, a woman came up and said, oh, Mr. Meiser, you have no idea how much I enjoyed those slides. That's why I'm glad to hear that. She said, you know, I was Dr. Haman's emergency room nurse. Were you really? Yes. She said, oh, he was smart. Oh, he was really smart. I said, so I've been told. She said, but you know, he could get cross. I said, is that a fact? She said, yes. Oh, yes. She said, one Saturday night, they brought in some ruffian who spoke with abusive language, nasty, fought the people who brought him in, said he was really nasty. So we put him down, and he was brought in because he had his ear half torn off. And she said to Dr. Haman, this is not a nice man, but we have to do this. What should I give him for pain? Nothing. So he sewed his ear back on. Don't get him cross. I said, if only Kitty would know how often I've shown that picture of her By the way, that window is still there on North 8th Street. You drive by in the general area right behind the former YWCA, you'll see that window. It's still there. Or at least it was there the last time I looked. Basically, a no-nonsense Sunday afternoon gathering. Now, Dr. Haman came to Reading. He was very much involved with the Evangelical Church movement, the Evangelical Association, which was once very, very strong. Virtually every village in Berks County at one time had an evangelical meeting house or an evangelical church. Most of them were frame, which is why so many of them no longer exist. He was a bishop in the evangelical church. This is he. Now, when Dr. Haman was born, he named him William Albright Haman. Who was Albright? Well, he was involved with the evangelical church. He was Jacob Albright. Albright College gives an award out, a Jacob Albright Award, at least they did, every year for whatever reasons to people. But anyhow, he named him because when he came as the bishop in the evangelical church. Now, he was there at the time. There was a problem in the 1890s with the Esherites and the Dubsites. Some associated themselves with this bishop, some associated themselves with the other bishop. People in Berks County associated with the wrong bishop. And they lost half the churches in Berks County. They had to buy their own church back. You know how well that went. Think about that. Anyhow, that is Dr. Haman's dad, Bishop Haman, and the fun group gathered for Sunday afternoon. Notice this woman has a hearing appliance. In the backyard. In the days before Tide, how did you get a white dress clean with grass stains? I don't know. But there they were. That's behind 122 North 8th, backyard. It was a birthday party. What was this party? Again, look carefully. George Washington's birthday. See the cherries and the, This picture always amuses me. Now, when you took pictures years ago with flashlight with magnesium powder, it's the only way to get bright light on a photograph years ago. After it was over, you had a room full of smoke. What do you bet these kids knew what was coming? The tea party. Miles, Guy, Agnes, and Fleet. Have a cherry. Story hour. I look at this picture and I marvel what a piece it is, a slice of history. Notice the gas light. And a question I always ask, if you wanted to go out this afternoon and buy a new mantle scarf, where would you go? It's your move. Again, take it with flashlight. But look how sharp and how nice that is with the lighting. Wounded knee. Notice in the background they had one of those old revolving bookcases that some of us remember from years back. They would go around and you could hold books on four sides. The French lesson. Look at that woodwork. On the boardwalk. This one amazed me when I first saw the label on the envelope. It was called the babysitter. I didn't know they had a word babysitter at that time period, but that's how it was labeled, the babysitter. Now, the question that I always ask, and few can answer, into what has he placed Kitty? I thought I heard it. Sewing machine lid. Remember the old sewing machines? That's a sewing machine lid. Hello Central. Now, when I spoke with Kitty, she said that in her room, she had a working telephone. Now get this, a working telephone that connected with another phone in the kitchen. She could call her mother in the kitchen. How many families had that? Not many. Isn't that a great picture? We all like a pretty tree. Notice on the platform they have moss. When was the last time you saw moss on a Christmas platform? Live, real moss. Now the next picture, which follows this one, I show for instructive purposes, and that is, if ever you buy a Christmas tree that's entirely too large for the room, what can you do to solve your problem? You shove it in the corner. You will never find an old-time picture of a Christmas tree in a house that was not taken by someone who was a commercial photographer or an advanced amateur photographer. Because they always shoved Christmas trees in a dark corner, and there was no way years ago with a regular camera and a regular person that you were going to get a likeness of your Christmas tree. And that's how they did it. You can see here how the flash powder reflected. Now, the pictures that you're going to see in this excellent exhibit after we leave here, you're going to see what Dr. Haman did. He cut out part of his picture. You see, there's a window shade here. He used that for a backdrop. So that when he would make these into a lantern slide, he would cut out the extraneous material. This is what he had called originally stolen pleasures. That's the only picture. I handed the Reading Eagle hundreds of photographs during the time that I wrote for them, and I only ever had one picture stolen, and that was this one. This is really a neat picture. If you'd see the original, you would be impressed. It's a good picture. There are the boys, stolen pleasures, nothing like smoking a good grape cigar, a grape leaf cigar. The Meiser, no relation. Again, a picture that he set up himself. A juicy morsel. Yum. Kitty Haman as a baby, a prim miss was how this was labeled, a prim miss. That picture has always intrigued me. That appeared in the Haman Hospital, Hospital magazine quite a number of years ago. They knew that I had some of these pictures, and they asked me, could I send them 2 photographs for the magazine, and this is one that I sent. When was the last time you drove through the countryside and saw so great a profusion of daisies in a field? Not very often anymore. No. He loves me not. Still life. He was one of the founders, Dr. Haman was one of the founders of the Reading Lantern Slide Club. Lantern slides were 3 1/4 by 4-inch glass plates that you would put into a projector to project on the wall, or in the case of this club meeting here, they had what appears to be something of a microscope. You would put the slide underneath and look down the way you would look into a microscope, and it was a slide viewer. It was essentially what it was. And this is Dr. Haman. I'm not sure who the other 2 were, but notice that Dr. Haman has a hole in his soul. And again, you see what he did here for the backdrop. That was a lot of work when you look back at that. Why would you hang a rug or whatever? The trouble that he went to years ago for a lot of these things. This was no easy matter. Childish pleasure. In that picture are Miles and Guy, the 2 sons. Both of them wound up in dentistry. You check in the city directories in the 1940s or whatever. They were listed at 118, was it? 118 North 8th Street. They had a joint dental office. They had 1 phone number and with a secretary, and the 2 sons practiced dentistry there on North 8th Street. Again, Guy passed away in 1962, and Miles lived until 1964. Kitty beat them all. She lived until 1990. That's it.